Welcome to the Yard. I'm your host, Marcus Preciado. We're gonna have a great show today. And as always, we've got the lovely and talented, not sure if he's more lovely or talented, Jefferson Drexler. Say hi to everybody in podcast land.
Hey, podcast land. I'm gonna adjust everything at the right time this time. Hey, Marcus, how you doing, man? Did you have a good weekend?
I had a great weekend, Jefferson. Great weekend. Almost all my weekends are great, though. This one specifically, my daughter Macy, my second born, graduated recently, and so we had her graduation party, which means in my family, code word for carne asada, street tacos.
Most importantly,
we had street tacos. But even more important than that, our guest today is Coach Jon Goodman. Jon Goodman is the head coach of Escondido Charter High School, as well as the founder of Play as One, which we'll chat about in a little bit. But Jon, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I don't know if it's better than street tacos, but I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know if it's better than street tacos, but they're great in their own way, Coach.
Yes, they were.
Well, you were there that night.
was.
How were the street tacos?
They were fabulous. Yeah, like this. I don't know if you remember this, talking about sports and game, but the guy that was flipping the tacos, he got the sauce and made the taco and then flipped the sauce in there and then catch it in his hip.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Jefferson, it was great.
Yeah.
So the taco cart consisted of these gentlemen with amazing skill sets, right? And the main guy would take the taco, right? And he would create it and he would craft it. I don't even want to say make the taco. Art. It was art. And he would put it together and he'd wrap it ever so tenderly and gently in the little paper. And to finish it off, Jefferson, he'd put it on the side. And he'd take the guacamole and the sauce and toss it about 10 feet in the air.
Yes.
And let it fall right there, man, with a just
Phenomenal.
display of deliciousness and craftsmanship. The best.
So since we're missing the era of Dodger dogs being thrown at you and peanuts getting thrown at the stadium, now we can do the same thing with tacos.
That's a great idea, especially in San Diego, Coach. You know how you call for peanuts and they throw it?
Yes.
Imagine you order your taco and you get the taco, but you don't get the condiments or the salsa, right? And they just take a spoon from far away, toss it in the air, and it lands on your taco.
And not to mention, it's probably COVID compliant because it's 6 feet social distancing. So
that's what he was doing. It probably wasn't even part of his show. He was just trying to make sure.
Following the guidelines.
Hey guys, in case those of you guys are watching, I'm COVID compliant. Yes. Well, this certainly is a COVID compliant game right here, Coach. We're gonna play some cornhole.
Love it.
All right, and so it's pretty easy. We're gonna go to 21, and so if you land on the board, it's 3. I know if you land in the hole, it's 3. Right, and if you land on the board, it's 1. First one to 21, and through it, I want to chat about a couple things going on in your life right now, and then we'll come back and talk about how faith and sports is colliding in your world. But why don't you pick a color, and why don't you go first, Coach?
Okay, I'll go with red. So I throw all 3 first, or do you
No,
one at a time?
one at a time.
Okay.
All right, good.
I'm on the board.
So, Coach, to begin the conversation, high school football coach. I know it's a passion of yours. I've coached with you. You coached my son. But you already had a different approach, which we'll talk about later, of incorporating biblical principles.
Yeah.
But what is it to be a high school coach right now during the COVID time? Coach, walk us through that.
Yeah, I think obviously everyone's wanting to know what's going to happen with sports in the fall, and I know our new commissioner came out with that. Hey, we're planning on moving forward. I think that's the right approach to take. Keep everyone focused on the goal at hand. Does that count as a point there for the record?
No, not even close, Coach.
So trying to get all of us on board with what the fall is going to look like. Is really important. So let's keep moving forward. We're going to have an announcement on July 20th from CIF.
Okay.
Basically laying out the rest of the fall sports. So hopefully we'll be on time, and for players in the county, just keep working towards that goal of being ready for fall sports.
So 1-1 right now. And what do you think the most likely scenario is, Coach, with I know as parents we're thinking, is there going to be a season? Is there not going to be a season? What do you think the most likely scenario is right now if there was a binary option of season yes, season, no?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a season. Golly, you're on fire
See
right
that,
now.
Coach? You see
yeah,
that?
I'm all over the place.
See that?
I think there's going to be a season, and I love the plan that the CIF and the state's taken is have contingency plans as we move forward in this all. So
Okay, so you got 1 point there. So you got 2.
I got 2.
I got
you
7.
Got 7. Yeah.
7 plus 1 is 8.
And you get to go first.
All
But
right,
yeah,
all right.
so it could postpone the seasons, the fall, working into the winter time, or we could start right on schedule.
Okay.
And so we obviously started summer conditioning last week, following all the guidelines and being COVID compliant with that. Different era by far with summer conditioning, but
Yeah.
so good to be back on the field with kids again, watching coaches coach their groups, and seeing kids smile and exercise and work out again.
What's been some of the most difficult factors of getting your brain ready to get into a season with so many variables that are unknown? Walk us through that.
Yeah, I think for coaches, I think the only approach you can take, and the only approach you should take, is to view this as opportunity. We tell our kids all the time that adversity is part of building good character. This grit and resiliency is part of building. For football guys on the field, most of the guys I've coached in my career have been men. But even for our women out there playing sports, this is a great chance to build character. And so, as coaches, why would we not take the same approach of looking at it as opportunity versus looking at it as, oh, this is a bummer? Because there's some bummer to it, but in the same breath, what a great opportunity it is to live out what we've been coaching all these years.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, because not only does that apply to coaching in football, but really what I found out, the people that are thriving during the COVID time now granted, Coach, I know there's some people that have been hit hard financially that are like, it's overwhelming. And I know people physically have gotten sick. But there's also those that have found the silver linings through this and who are really thriving through it. And the ones that I found that are doing that are the ones that have that mindset, because it was a curveball for everybody.
Yeah, that's right.
No matter what you were doing, whether you were a church or a business or an organization or a nonprofit, you had to readjust, right? You had to change your game plan. And what I found out, that the ones that have that mentality and have expressed that and have applied it to their life are the ones really thriving this time. And there's some people that, even though COVID has been hard, really because of that mindset and focusing on the opportunities and seeing where is the Lord moving through this. And they've found adjusting and found themselves really making a difference in different ways they didn't anticipate.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, having that mindset. Obviously your son's at Stanford, and one of the leading researchers in this is Carol Dweck on the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, right? So having a growth mindset, what can I learn from this? God, what are you doing in the midst of this, and how do you want me to partner with what you're doing?
Yeah.
I think as believers, our job is to abide and look for those opportunities to impact.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what God's doing right now. He's letting me whoop the butt up right, on cornhole.
It's 10 to 9?
8 to 1.
8 to 1.
8 to 1.
Math is hard.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you like that? You like that?
Yes. I got to get more lined up here.
Gosh, man, I am destroying you,
are.
Coach. Destroying
And I
you.
still haven't recovered from the game of 21 you beat me in a couple months ago.
Yeah. That's going to be
So-
sad if I beat you in this, Coach, and I beat you in 21 as
Yes.
well. We're going to have to.
Have you ever had someone cry on the episode of VR?
Yeah, me, the first time we played this. All right, great. And so,
I got two, I think I got 2 now.
you got 2? That's good. You're up to 2.
Yes.
Which is nice.
Yes.
I got 4 more. What was my score, Jefferson? Was it 9?
9, so you're at 13 to 2.
All right, 13 to 2.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears, Coach, going from high school football coaching to really another part of your passion. It's all underneath the same umbrella. You're a guy that likes to make a difference in people's lives. You're a guy that you understand that God has wired you to change people's lives, and you do that through different ways. You do that through, one, you just do it the way you live. You do it as a father. You know, the impact that you're having on your children. You do that as a coach. But most recently, you've started a nonprofit that's having a huge impact, the Play as One organization. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Coach?
Yeah, so we started this in 2017, to make a long story as short as we can here, but we were called to this mission to coach the heart of athletes, their families, and the community with the gospel. And so we started that in 2017, now we're 2020, and it's impacted over 1,000 families to this date. And so couldn't be more excited about watching what God's doing through the hearts of his people. There's an old quote by Chuck Colson that I really love, and he said that there's lack of hope in our society. And where do people find hope? It's not in the laws that were passed or the great things we do as a nation, but our hope is found in the power of God working through the hearts of his people.
Yeah.
And what Play as One has essentially done is just equipped and sent believers with God's spirit in them to go do work in the community.
So that's the big picture, but on the practical level, what does Play as One look like?
Yeah,
What
so-
is it all about?
Yeah, Play as One, essentially we started off with doing sports camps in 2014, even before the vision had come. We were just doing camps that were faith-based for kids in Escondido. And 2014 came along, 2015 came along. Got to 2017, we had a situation in town that was a tragedy, and we can go more into that down the road. But it grew from camps to leagues, now to clubs, and now we're moving into arts and vocational training. And ultimately educational, discipleship education in the community. So we're super excited about it.
Oh, that's great. That is great. I know that every one of my kids has participated in Play as One. Oh, you see that?
I did. Yeah.
Coach,
yeah.
I'm kind of embarrassed for you, Coach, a little bit.
I'm a little bit embarrassed as well.
bit.
But here's where it comes in. You start bringing, bounce off. You start bringing this comeback mentality. You got to go after it now.
We're going to see how you respond to this
Yes.
adverse situation.
So 14-2 right now.
All right.
You got the blue on the board.
Yeah.
And let's see if we can come back here.
Uh-oh.
Oh, you're blocking the hole on me though.
Oh,
I'm gonna go back in.
Coach, that was solid, man. That was solid.
So I'll take the 3. That's gives me 5 now.
Okay, you're up to 5, which is good.
And you're up to
I mean,
what, 16?
yeah, 5 is good, Coach. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's far from 16.
It is not 16.
If you were planning on coming back,
Now's the time.
now's a good time to start it.
Yes. Yeah, you get to go first. I think. Well, I got the most points that round. I get to go first this one, don't I? Oh, I'm off again.
So you mentioned over 1,000 families have been impacted, and I know Play as One doesn't only do the camps; they do some outreaches as well.
That's right.
Right, and ultimately, there's a bigger hope that you have really to even start a school, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah, a discipleship academy really in town where students can learn, not only the sports, we call it SAVE in a nutshell. So sports, arts, vocation, and education. And we believe that God's called us to do that in the community of Escondido, and Escondido kind of being the center of the wagon wheel and point out to other communities and bring them in and send them out, bring them in and send them out. So, we partnered last February on Superfest, right? So that was a great event on campus there. Obviously we're moving in some different directions. We've been brainstorming a new program we're calling Classroom California. With the fall not knowing what it's going to look like for some families, how can we provide services and opportunities for families to engage on their off days of schools if they don't go back full time? So it's just really being mindful of what's going on in the community and how we can best serve and love the community of Escondido and North County.
Why have you chosen sports as the vehicle? So obviously sports had to be important to you and make an impact on your life as a young man. So why is sports the vehicle that you've chosen?
Well, I think it was just the trajectory. That was
speaking of trajectory.
That was almost nothing but net.
Speaking
there,
of trajectory, right there.
Sports has obviously been something I've grown up with since I was a kid. We moved here to Escondido in 1984, and I've always loved sports. And so, just growing up, playing it, coaching it, it just became a natural transition for us. Honestly, if you look at the culture that we're living in, for a lot of families, for a lot of kids, sports is their idol. And so obviously with the gospel, we want anything you love more, anything that you love more than God, it becomes an idol.
Yeah.
So we want to remove the idol of sport and place Jesus at the proper spot. And same thing for families. If you look at a lot of our families at times, sport isn't the idol, it's their kid becomes their idol. So we want to get this healthy view of how we should play the sport with joy for God's glory. So it's just been a natural progression to go from sports into the arts and into vocation training. So just was an easy transition into that in the sports world.
And you mentioned this earlier, and you talked about it right there, but the camps, the outreaches, the events aren't really only about the athlete. One thing that I've enjoyed as I get to know you and be a part of Play as One is it's really a holistic approach, right? It's more the family.
That's right.
Right, and so I've seen so many sports and coaches and activities and camps where the parents drop off Johnny, right? And then Johnny hears something or learns some skill set, or even if it's a Christian-based organization, they focus on Johnny, and mom and dad really are just Johnny's being taken care of. But what I like about this model is that we understand the importance of the family being involved. And so really when one is involved to play as one, it's not you finding a spot for your children to do sports or to get discipled. It's really, how is our family entering into a discipleship program where sports or arts are kind of the vehicle in which we use it? Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. It is a discipleship program. It's spot on. And the story after story we've seen over these last, since 2017 when it officially launched, but going back to 2014 camps, it's equipping families to love other families around them. We have had, dads that have come to watch their kid practice, but aren't at home with the mom anymore. They're separated. And just being around these other men and dads, they've been reunited with their wives. And now they're not only watching practice, they're out there helping and they're head coaching and they're doing different things. So it's been a great community of faith coming together under this banner of Play as One, but really under the banner of Christ as number one.
Yeah, I wanna kind of stay there for a little bit because the game's over because I beat you.
Was that 21?
21 right there, because
Jefferson, did he add right on that?
3 and 2 plus 16, that's 21. So
okay.
So that's 21. Speaking of 21,
yes.
That's 21. I beat you in 21, and now this
21.
coach. Yeah. This one was documented though, so this one's going to be hard
well,
too.
I confessed the other one too, so I'm okay with that.
You said something there that if we just talk about it, kind of okay, whatever, but that's a big deal. And so I know there are instances where the father is going through a spiritual difficult time, right? You mentioned one where some struggles at home with the wife, which is typical.
Yeah.
I've been married 20 years, and I was just sharing with you last week what a huge breakthrough that my wife and I have gone through, because even though there's been plenty of love and commitment and support and fun, there's also plenty of hiccups and difficulties and confusion through it, but so cool that this man who's having these struggles at home, through participating in Play as One, really God used that to realign himself as a husband.
Yeah.
But that's not an anomaly. That's kind of the philosophy. And I know there's lots of stories like that, even because of camps, people bringing in children into their homes, right? And so just share with us another
that
story
story was
of what God's
amazing.
doing.
So this is a very similar story to the one I shared about the dad watching from the stands, just watching their kid practice and doing work. This dad from the stand was watching, and then we invited him to be a participant, come out and coach, and he started getting involved coaching. And then the next thing I know, he's telling me the story about him and his wife were walking out to the car at a Walmart, and they saw a woman and their son walking out to the car with them, kind of congruent, parallel to them, and they noticed that the car was filled like they had been living in the car. So the dad's response, and really new believer, hey, we got to invite them to come live with us. And I'm just thinking, that's a movement of the Spirit, because that takes courage and guts. And I was like, wow, so what'd she say? And he's like, she said yes. And so he invited the boy to come play in our leagues. He got his first touchdown a spring ago before COVID. You're out there coaching that game, and got his first touchdown, and been staying with the family and mom and getting help. But again, it goes back to activating people's faith when you feel like God's calling on you to be more than just a football coach, more than just a football player or a water polo player or whatever that thing is that you do. And we use it as opportunity to glorify the Lord in it. Yeah. That's the response of the dad and the wife. And I tell you, the wife, we see them at different events through Play as One, and she's said, hey, my husband's a different man because of the ministry that God's doing through his heart through coaching. Yeah. And I mean, and he can do that anywhere. It's not just a Play as One thing. You can do that in your local Little Leagues, your local Pop Warners. Yeah. But it's changing our perspective of how we approach sport from the way we probably were raised, a lot of us, this transactional approach. Yeah. You're good, you play, you're not good, you sit the bench. Yeah. So now, hey, let's have this transformational approach instead of transactional approach to the way we look at the game. Yeah. And one other story is one of my favorite ones is the young man who you know very well came to our first football practice, and he's in a wheelchair. And I'll tell you, this young man has had more impact on a football program than anyone I've ever seen in my career. And most coaches would say there's not a spot for you. And this young man has made such a huge influence and impact on everybody in our program, from his teammates to the coaching staff, to the campus, to the administrators on that campus.
So let's talk about that, Coach, because this is a unique story because of your philosophy not being transactional. Because as a football coach, you're looking at how we're going to win games. Yeah. Okay, I'm talking a typical thought process.
Sure.
Okay, how are we going to win? Okay, we need to get the athletes to win the games. Okay, who are the athletes that are going to play? The athletes that are going to play are the ones that can contribute to that win. And that's a general philosophy that's tried and true, right? I wouldn't even say is wrong when it comes to what your goal is. If your goal is to win games as a head football coach, that's not a wrong goal.
Yeah, make no mistake about it. We're out there to win a game on a Friday night. Yes.
But there's a better way, right? Which you don't have to sacrifice success, which, you know, the amount of success that you've had as a coach has been tremendous, but you don't have to sacrifice championships for doing things a transformational way. So back to what I was saying, this young man, if in a typical environment, doesn't have much to offer a football program because he's in a wheelchair. And so therefore, for him to not to have a fit in it, makes sense. But we know, like you said, not only has he offered and brought much, he's helped transform not only attitudes within the football teams, but attitudes outside as well, as these eyes have been on him, as the kids have learned to serve him, and frankly, the value he's brought with his skill set. So kind of walk us through kind of that scenario of going, not what can I get from kids, but really how can I be used to be a blessing in their lives?
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to the conversation we had about the COVID hitting, right? If we view it as opportunity versus struggle and versus adversity, we view it as opportunity. So here's this young man who meets with me and his mom in a Chick-fil-A right after a summer conditioning. And mom, bless her heart, love her to death, great friends with the family today. But she started, engaging the conversation. What I looked at this young man is, here's a young man that needs to learn how to engage the conversation for himself, to take the initiative. And so I started addressing the young man, and you could see that he had a desire to be a part of something greater than himself. And so once you see that, you think, okay, well, there's opportunity, there's a coachability. Where can we plug him in to be successful and to grow in his passions and use his gifts and his talents? And it didn't take long. He was extremely talented young man. So again, more impact than it. One of my favorite videos is the video we've been pushing him. We do an upside down drill in practice, and so we'll make the offensive skill position guys be O linemen and the O linemen be skill position guys. Well, Matthew's been out there, filming practices and doing all the work, and we put him in a practice situation where they wheeled him in to score a touchdown. Well, about 3 weeks later, they did the same drill in a game. I don't know if you remember this story.
I do. It's my favorite play ever as a coach.
Yeah,
seeing that.
And it's a beautiful story. And not only did it impact Matthew from scoring the touchdown, it impacted his team, not the 11 guys on the field, but the entire team, and the opposing team. If you watch that video, you see the opposing team yelling, "That's awesome." And so it brought such joy to the community because there was using opportunity for God's glory. And that's what occurred with that story.
Well, I'll take that even further just to talk about the ripple effects of your philosophy of coaching as opposed to how do we just win. When I saw that had a huge effect on me. That was amazing. An amazing part when he went out there and he scored a touchdown. And the way he did it is he was pushed by his peers, right? As everybody celebrated it. But beyond that, I had a chance to share a message at a church not too long after that. So we did have that footage that we captured. So as I'm sharing with the church, that day I would say just people there live, about 7,000 people got to see that, and maybe thousands of more just through online to see that story, and it helped impact them. And beyond that, because you found his skill set, or he showed his skill set and he filmed, think of all the value you got from Matthew. Right? Amazing. And all the value he received, where eventually now, I literally hired that young man to do some filming that we needed. And so now he's even making money, right? Has a small business because someone gave him a chance to get plugged in.
And we've gotten so much more from him than we could ever have given to him. I hadn't heard the story about you sharing it at the service, and I rippled out from that. It's a phenomenal story.
Well, you shared, Coach, that it doesn't have to be in the realm of football. It doesn't have to be in the realm of sports even. How can this philosophy, wherever you are, if you embrace it, to go from, as opposed to transactional, to go to transformational, think of the impact that you could have as opposed to how do I win this game, or how do I close this deal, or how do I get my spouse to do what I want them to do, or my kids to obey. What if we took an approach of being transformational? And I know that I've seen it firsthand, and my challenge to you is take time to think of where you are right now in your life, and how can God use your position to make a huge difference in people's lives, not only directly but indirectly through you. Just basically, he's just following biblical principles. Stay tuned, everybody, as we come right back with Coach Jon Goodman, and we discuss how faith and sports has collided in his world. Welcome back to the yard where faith and sports collide. We're here with Coach Jon Goodman, head football coach of a high school team here in Escondido, California, as well as the founder of Play as One. Jon, thanks again.
Yeah, it's been fun. Although losing the cornhole wasn't all that fun, but it's been fun being here.
This is my favorite part of the show, Coach, is really where we get to talk about faith. And I know that, as we talked about earlier, faith is very important in your life, but God has used sports in a unique way to kind of draw him to you. Chat with us about what that looks like in your life.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, like how sports became such an important part of my life really goes back to the journey of where I grew up. And I share this story at times where my biological dad and my mom married and then had marital problems. So I don't remember this moment, but I was about 2 to 3 years old, and he basically dropped us off at a gas station and left us. And so we had to find our way back to home and find our way in this new reality. And it was hard on my mom. My mom had a lot of struggles as a kid, and I remember watching her go, and you don't know how much the struggle is because you're a kid, but the story I share at times as well is, my mom and I we'd eat a kind of a TV dinner, and she would heat it up in the oven, and she would let me eat what was there, and she would eat what was remaining. And so times were tough for us as a kid. But I remember the lack of a dad being something I was like, I didn't understand it and couldn't comprehend and process it until this thing called sport came in my life. We had moved from Yuma, Arizona to Escondido, California in 1984. And it was a big year in Escondido, it was a big year in San Diego because the Padres had made the World Series. And I remember as a kid watching on TV Steve Garvey hitting a home run and running the bases with his arm up in the air, if you remember this well. Yeah. And I asked my mom to sign me up for baseball at the Vineyard Mall in Escondido. And I don't know how we afforded it, but we got down to the mall and I got signed up for baseball. And I remember playing right field and batting ninth and just having the time of my life, just enjoying sport. There was a moment in that time where the coach, started announcing all the batting averages, all the home runs, all the strikeouts, and lo and behold, I was the worst player on the team. And so I remember it was the first time that a man had told me my identity was based on my performance, which is a lie. We obviously our values based in Christ's death, burial, and the good news of resurrection, right? So, but for a long time in my life, from the time I was 9 at that moment to, through high school, I just tried to earn and perform to get value, and sport became that opportunity to earn value based on performance. It wasn't until I met my high school football coach, varsity football coach, a gentleman by the name of Rich Watkins, who showed me that my value wasn't based on how I performed on the field, but because God loved me. And he did that in very simple ways. Spend time with me. He invited all the defensive backs to his house to have dinner one night. And I remember watching him and his wife, who was pregnant with their firstborn child at the time, just love us in their house, feed us, care for us. And so really going from a transactional coach in Little League to a high school coach that really loved me, not because I could play football well, but because he loved me for me. And that became my journey in sport. And that's why today I have such a passion for coaching and loving kids through sport and really hopefully being that transformational coach in their lives. If I can be half the coach that Rich Watkins was in my life, I think I'm doing pretty good. And I'm still trying to get to the halfway marker, if you will. But very grateful, eternally grateful to have a coach step into my life and show me that my value isn't based on the minutes I play or the points I score, but my value is based on who Christ says I am.
It's interesting because both those events, if you look at them removed from your person, are both pretty benign events, pretty like everyday events. One, a coach going over the stats of a player, right, is typical behavior. Not knowing what that behavior or what that action, what the residual effects are as Johnny hears them, right?
Yeah.
Or little Jon Goodman hears them. And the other act, right? Another pretty benign act of, hey, just bringing people into your family, using biblical principles, encouraging people, but they both are powerful acts. And as I hear that, I see the first one, although not wrong, but it's not rooted in love, right? And you talked about transformational coaching as opposed to transactional coaching,
Right.
and it certainly is a transactional tactic. And the other one is rooted in love, right? Bringing people into your home, love. Displaying godly biblical principles, love. Encouraging you, love. So two acts that seem pretty simple, but if you look at the root of them, you can see why one had such a powerful impact and the other one had a powerful impact in the negative way. And it shows me the power of the things that you're doing, Coach, which is how do I apply biblical principles in everything that I do?
That's right. Yeah, and I think that's important. I think, we've talked, off camera here too about the concept of like transactional versus transformational and what that looks like. And I think sometimes people, they want to put, the transformational as just lovey-dovey. But make no mistake about it, we want to be really good at the X's and O's. Kids come to play football for me because they want to become a better football player. So I really take that platform of football, X's and O's, and I need to be great at it because that's what they're coming for. What they don't understand also though is that that's not where we stop. Where I think most coaching is very easily, you fall in the trap of being transactional. So you fall in the trap of just coaching X's and O's. Well, if that's all there is, in a high school season in San Diego County, you got 80 teams that don't win CIF championships, and you got, Division 5 through 1 that win, so 5 teams that do. So, you got to be great at the X's and O's. You got to know how to motivate kids, and you got to know how to unlock their hearts. And really, that's the three-dimensional coaching approach that we use in our program to coach transformationally. But once you have their hearts, and once they know you love them, it frees them up to go play with joy, play without fear of making mistakes, because we're all going to make mistakes on an athletic field. We started summer conditioning last Monday, and it's one of my favorite stories of last week. One of the freshman kids that came into the program just said, "Hey, Coach, man, I've heard more about love this week than I had my 3 years prior in Pop Warner together combined." And once they understand that they can go and play, there's joy in playing, and that's what you hope. And then hopefully those little moments like we're discussing here today, like Coach Watkins was inviting me over to dinner, those will be the moments they'll go back and revisit. Because I really do believe it's those voices that we hear in our heads from our former coaches that start directing kind of our thinking.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that thinking can get off track really easily based on transactional voices versus voices of love that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah. And I know that the way that you coach and the philosophy you embrace, there's really a duality to how you evaluate each season. As you said, as a coach, the wins matter, losses matter. You address them, you identify them, and you play each game to win. And you've had a lot of success on X's and O's and winning championships. But I love your philosophy too, when I heard it early on, was that you're really going to evaluate your season in a different way, a unique way. Tell us about really how you evaluate each season with those young men and women that play.
Yeah, you talk about wins and losses, and those are goals, right? Those have very clear beginning and ends to them. So we want to win a league title, we want to win a CIF championship, and those are great goals to establish, but they'll have a very clear ending to them. But our purpose, why we play and how we are going to play. So, we came down with this concept based off of a great book for, I think, every parent to read called Raising a Modern Day Knight. But we talk about working hard, living pure, leading with courage, and honoring the team. Obviously a faith-based book, in a public school, we got to say honor the team versus honor Jesus. But in that book, it just talks about living our purpose out. And so for me, when we talk about what it means to be a man in a football program, it's those 4 qualities. But how are we going to measure if we're being successful, really, to answer your question, is 10 to 15 to 20 to 30 years down the road from now, when these young men that I've coached, and truthfully, we've coached some young women that have been phenomenal in our football program as well, when these young men and young women, in this case, are husbands and fathers. And so that's how we're going to know we've been successful. And I'm an old guy right now, so a lot of these guys are husbands and fathers now, and it's such a privilege to look at what they're doing to lead their families in this community.
Yeah. Let's go back, Coach, to where that second event that you mentioned that started really affecting your life, and really that dinner, that encouragement, that love put you down a different path. right? It was an epiphany in some way for you. Just this man living godly biblical principles. So how did that path, once you got started, just kind of talk to us about what things happened in your life to get to where you are now for you?
Yeah, and I remember being at the table and Laura and Rich had prayed for the meal, and I just remember thinking, golly, what is that they have? Because it's love, but I didn't know what that was. I just liked it. I was attracted to it. So I just started asking a ton of questions, and asking kids on our football team that were going to church, what's this like? Had a really neat family in my life at that time named James and Patricia Spann, who were invite me over to breakfast every morning to feed me, and I started asking these questions about faith. And it was the moment, an embarrassing moment to share, but my family had struggled with alcohol for their life, my stepdad and my mom, and coming over with the youth group one night, just had started attending church, and we were just singing Christmas carols in the neighborhoods, and came over to our house, and we weren't welcome at my house to sing Christmas carols at night because family had been drinking, and so I was really embarrassed of that moment, and so our whole youth group gets back in a van, and I'm just embarrassed. And I remember talking to Coach Watkins about this moment and the season and the Spans about this moment of the season, and it was those moments where the struggle is real, and even to this day, going back to that moment, remembering those moments, they're hard because you can't control them. And but having a guy that loves you, that's going to listen to you, and not judge you for it, are hugely important. So having someone that loves you for you, and you can be you and not have to hide the shame that's not yours to hide in the first place, was a beautiful moment. And that's what can continue drawing me to the cross. Because if this guy has Christ in him, and he can have patience and grace and love, so whoever this guy he's serving is the guy I want to follow. So I just kept running down those roads, Marcus, just like, okay, tell me more about this Jesus guy. And the story really comes back to this full circle, because going back to the Yuma days where we're sharing TV dinners, I was brought into a family by a lady by the name of Smokey Vickers. And so she took care of me while my mom was trying to get things back into shape. So I stayed with this family for quite a home assignment, if you will. And so she ended up getting cancer my junior year of high school. And so asking that question to Coach Watkins, and then ended up going to a Christian camp called Featherstone Christian Camp to bring this story into full circle. And I remember asking the story, why does bad things happen? Why does Smokey have cancer? And not really getting those answers. And then come that Christmas season, Smokey passes away. This lady that took care of me as a kid during the hardest seasons of childhood, she passes away of cancer. And I remember being up in Bakersfield. It was Christmas Eve, and I just left hospice care at the home of the apartment she was in, and I've been driving back and forth. I went to A&PM. By the time I came back from A&PM with Christmas Eve dinner, she had passed away. So all these questions I'm wrestling with as a young high school kid. And where do you go? Go to Coach, And so because of a transformational coach like Coach Watkins, because of transformational people who just love, they just pointed you to the cross. And eternally grateful for those people today. And going back to that story, ended up going back to the Christian camp a year later, working in the kitchen like I normally did, just asking questions about the gospel, hearing this simple song, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And I remember the guy got up, I just got done cleaning dishes. It was a 3rd, 4th, 5th grade camp. And I was cleaning the dishes in the kitchen, and I came back and I heard this guy share this simple message. And it'll be the message I would share today to people that are listening. In despite of the hard times that we're in, or whatever you're facing today, the truth of the matter is God is in the same place He's always been. He's in heaven, on the throne, so concerned about every moment of our lives. And that same spot He is right now was the same spot He was when Jesus went to the cross. And He watched Him take His last breath, get buried in a tomb, and raise again. He's still God, and He's still in control. And I love the concept of Romans. It says, suffering leads to perseverance. Perseverance leads to character, and character leads to hope. And if we know there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. And that's really the message in coaching. And that was what Coach Watkins did. That's what all my great transformational coaches have done. They pointed you to this hope that you have in the future to give you power in the present, and what opportunities we have with that power in the present. And it's a supernatural power for those who believe in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Coach. And as you share that, I think of the story of a young Joseph, who went through some terrible times. God had revealed to him that he had great plans for him, but Joseph, through a series of events, finds himself now sold by his brothers. I mean, that's hard, and then finds himself basically being an indentured servant, a slave, right? And not only that, by sticking up for the things of God and rejecting Potiphar's wife chasing after him, he finds himself in jail. And there's all these circumstances that on paper looked like they were going to destroy that young man, right? Being betrayed by your brothers, being a slave, and now being incarcerated, that's not a path for success. But yet through that, something that the devil wanted to use in his life to destroy him, right? God miraculously took all those things and used it for his glory. And as we know, he eventually sat right there as a second guy in charge of all of Egypt. And through that, was able to open up the doors, not only for Egypt to really be successful, but really to go rescue God's people and rescue his family. And that was essentially the birth of God's people as a nation. And I think of the difficult things that we go through, certainly in your case, things that could have destroyed you, but what the devil planned for evil in your life, right? I see now why you coach the way that you do, why you think it's so important, and you're committed to be a transformational coach. And Coach, as difficult as those things were, that wouldn't be implemented in your heart if you didn't go through them. Yeah. And I think of on the other side, how many families, including myself, young kids, individuals, players, and observers have been touched by the ministry that God is doing through you. And that came through pain and difficulty, but something that the devil wanted to use to destroy you. Indeed, the Lord has used it for his glory.
Amen. Praise be to God for that. On that note, it was interesting. My wife and I sat down and watched this Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad film. I don't know if you've seen that film or not yet. But there's a scene in the film where she's obviously escaped slavery, and she's gone back and got her some of her family members and brought it back, and she's meeting in the Underground Railroad basement at one point, and she says to the people in this basement, like, some of us have forgotten what it was like to be a slave. Some of you have never been a slave. And so I think about Coach Watkins and his commitment to help someone who was enslaved to sin, doesn't know the hope to come back and get me. And so that's why we're compelled to do what we do today. Because when you've tasted freedom in Christ, you want the whole world to know about it. And that's where the passion comes from, alongside the story of Joseph too. I think it's very encouraging. Thank you for sharing that. But you're just compelled to keep serving, keep loving. And the one thing I do know is my job is to provide opportunity for people to experience God's love. I can do that as a football coach. It's not complicated. God does the rest.
Thanks again for joining us today. We thank Coach Jon Goodman for sharing his powerful story. And it just reminds me, you guys, if you're listening today and you're struggling with, the difficult things that you've gone through, and then you're struggling with, how can God use me? I think today is a great example of just tasting and seeing that God is good. And if you do that, you'll realize that He's worth trusting. He is worth devoting your life to. And the things in your life that have been difficult, maybe to destroy you, if you give them over to the Lord, He can use those same things, those same pains, those same traumas for His glory and to help other people as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I want to say a huge thank you to Christian Podcast Central for partnering with us, YouTube as well. Do us a favor, subscribe to our YouTube channel where all of our episodes are there and more. Stay tuned for next week for another great time here in the yard.